meeting, and that was something, because I see a lot of me in her, and I remember being her age, and the train was already on the track, and no matter what anybody told me, I was going to do what I was going to do. So she knows my story pretty much, and I just wanted to show her, if she ever needs a place to go, where to go. And she really got a lot out of it. The man who spoke was an actor, and she does a lot with theater and acting, so there really is no coincidence as why we came the week that he was speaking. And so just a little bit about me. My home group is a Design for Living in Neptune. I go on the Sunday night meeting. It's at 7 o'clock every week. It's also on Zoom now. I have a sponsor, Jackie, who's here. And I've always had a sponsor. My sobriety date is October 25th of 1997. I came in very young. I was only 21 years old. And the things that they told me in the beginning, don't drink, go to meetings, get a sponsor, get a home group, and get a commitment, I've done the entire 23 years I've been here. And I think that those are the foundational suggestions that will keep you here, when you get a commitment, even if it's a greeter or a coffee or whatever. Back in the day, it was picking up ashtrays. I would do those things because I just knew that I had to be here. I just knew that my way of life wasn't working. And, I really think that, a lot about what they talk about here is the psychic change. For me, I believe that I'm just wired negative. It's always been doom and gloom, what's wrong? Oh, look at my life. Oh, this sucks, whatever. And I could still get like that today, because that's just kind of what's been imprinted on me. Some people call it alcoholism. Some people call it the conditioning of our parents, conditioning of society, whatever. But that's just the way that I am. And unless I have some sort of shift in my perception, that's the way I'm going to be. And anything can trigger that on a daily basis. Anything can trigger that feeling again. So I don't know why, but I brought my big book. I know this isn't a big book meeting, but this is the book we use here. Now, in my first 9 years, I really didn't open this book much. Back then, there was a lot of meetings where they would just say, don't drink and go to meetings. They would say, find people to kind of hang out with. A lot of the messages that I heard, whether they were said or not, was more about fellowship. And I believe that that's what's kept me sober the first 9 years. I did have a sponsor, like I said. I did go through the work a couple of times, but I just can't say that I experienced that psychic change that they talk about at that point in my sobriety. I did get some sense of a higher power. I, at that point, couldn't relate it to a religion. I related it more to the universe, the ocean, the stars. Obviously that's not man-made. When they talked about a higher power, it seemed very far-fetched to me. I couldn't relate it to the religion I grew up with. So, like I said, I did a lot of those speaker meetings like this, and it didn't really I didn't really dive deep into the causes and conditions of what was really wrong with me. But you know what? In early sobriety, sometimes you don't do that, and I feel that everything that I've gotten over the years was exactly what I needed at that time. Hanging out at diners till 3 o'clock in the morning, that's what I did. going on camping trips and whitewater rafting. Ed knows. That's what I did. He saved my life, whitewater rafting one year. And, and that's what I did, I was young, and there was, by the grace of God, a lot of young people in the meetings I was going to. And we did a lot of that stuff, the dances, the trips like that. We went to Hawaii one year. It was amazing. And it really taught me how to have fun without having to drink. That's what all those years were about. I never knew how to do that. I thought you had to get drunk or high to be able to have fun, or to just be at ease. I was always, I'm the type of person that just goes. It's very hard for me to sit still. When they talk about prayer and meditation, it's hard for me to sit still for a long period of time. And so those beginning years were crucial. But that was my experience in those years. And, one thing I have to say too is, even though I did have a lot of consequences when it came to the alcohol, I ended up getting a misdemeanor. I got arrested a couple times. I was in a raid, a drug raid in Old Bridge. I spent the whole day in jail, numerous car accidents, tickets, fines, and, everything you get by living that lifestyle. That's what was happening to me. Possession of whatever, and I just remember always wanting to not feel. I would do anything that was there to not feel. And I wanted to get as far away from the thoughts in my head as possible. And the substances worked, until they didn't work anymore. And this is just part of my story, but something happened to me where I feel God intervened. And I feel that if you're sitting here right now, something intervened in your life to get you to be able to sit in this chair tonight. And when I look back at those consequences that I received, now I see them as God calling me, like something else that I can't see or feel wanted me to get better. Something else didn't want me to live that life anymore. And I found out what happened was on January 1st of 97, that first day of the year, I remember flushing everything that I had that night down the toilet. And I was with somebody, a drug dealer, who I was friends with his girlfriend, but I was with him, and knew that I just was a shitty person. I just didn't care about anybody's feelings. I didn't care that I knew his girlfriend, none of that stuff mattered to me. I didn't have any compassion or, feelings for other people. It was always just about what I needed to get for me and what I needed to do for Kristy. And so that day, I just remember looking in the mirror, flushing the stuff down the toilet, and I said, I had known about AA because my father was an alcoholic, or is, and my mother had gone to Al-Anon. She brought me to Alateen. I was already in a whole bunch of youth groups and kind of like intensive, not outpatient, kind of like an outpatient group for younger kids. By the time I was 16, I was in that. And something, I don't know why, but I just said, I have to do something different. It's a new year, I have to do something different. And I started going to AA meetings at the Shoreline Club in Belmar. And I met a bunch of these young people. And one thing that's always been my thing to do is immediately get into a relationship. So that's what I did. I could never, ever, ever be alone. I've had a boyfriend since I'm 15 years old, and the last 9 months is the first time in my life that I've been by myself. And that's huge for me. That is huge, because as an addict or alcoholic, alcohol isn't the only thing I use. External things are really easy to use too. Money, sex, relationships, other people, just anything that you can get or do out there can be a replacement for the alcohol. And I know a lot of us in here do that, including me. And so, and I don't think anybody can judge anyone for that, because I don't think it's only alcoholics who do that. I am a teacher. That's how I knew about the Zoom and the stuff we go through every day. And fortunately, I don't have to deal with that. I teach preschool disabilities kids, so I'm in class all day with the kids. But my coworkers, that's what they do every single day, is this, juggling the computer, and there's 15 kids in the class and 10 kids on the computer. And it's tough. It's been a tough year. So what was I saying? Oh, replacing the alcohol. So that's what I did immediately. I started going to the Shoreline Club, immediately got into a relationship. And about a month and a half later, this is around mid-February, from January to mid-February, I wasn't feeling good. I just wasn't feeling good. I'm thinking maybe it's all this stuff coming out of my body. I don't know. I don't know what it is. But I found out that I had cancer at 20 years old. And I was in Bay Shore in Homedale, and they said there's nothing that they could do for me. They brought me to Sloan Kettering in Manhattan, where I stayed for 2.5 months on chemo, radiation, numerous bone marrow biopsies, spinal taps, ports in my chest, lost all my hair, and they read me my last rites. And they said I had a 75% chance of not surviving. And after the 2.5 months, they said, miraculously, they couldn't find any more cancer cells in my bone marrow. I had leukemia, so it's blood cancer. And they sent me home. I had lost the hearing in my left ear, almost all of it, which never came back. And I was like walking sideways because my equilibrium was shot. And the guy that I had met kind of stuck with me through all that. And so I leaned on him a lot for support, because my parents weren't very supportive. My dad would yell at me to take me back and forth to the hospital because I was ruining his Friday nights. And, very, very compassionless father. And so through that situation, I had to go back and forth to the hospital for that year. I was going to Brookdale. I finished Brookdale while I was getting my treatments. I got better. I got better. And knock on wood, it's been 24 years since that happened. And but something happened while I was in the hospital. I had to keep going back and forth like every other month to get more chemotherapy. And there was a girl, and this is what I mean about God and no coincidences. She was on the other side of the curtain 2 of the times that I had to go back. And her name was Cindy. And she would be laughing with her sisters and playing games or cards or whatever. And I'm sitting on the other side of the curtain like this miserable, on the phone, get me out of here. Why is this happening to me? God's punishing me for being bad. And she came over to the other side one day. A couple times she did. And she said, why are you so unhappy? Why are you always so angry? And that anger has been with me for a long, long time. One of the things that I struggle with, even to this day, is anger. And I'm like, well, why are you so fucking happy? I'm like, what is there to be happy about when you're diagnosed with cancer at 20 years old? You know, and she was only like 27. And she just was a happy girl. And, you know, I'll never forget her. I knew her for what? A second of my life. And I'll never forget her. And turns out that she got the bone marrow transplant and passed away when she got it. And the day that I found out about that was my consultation to get the bone marrow transplant. And I looked right at those doctors and I said, no way, I'm not getting this. And, you know, there was other things around it. Like once you get something like that, you can't have kids. I knew I always wanted kids. And they had said I was in remission. So I said, well, if it comes back, we'll talk about it then. But I'm not getting this now. And these are like the top doctors, you know, at Sloan. And I've never had to get it, thank God. And I have 3 healthy kids, you know, which they said I would probably never happen. And I think, and I know it's because of her that I made that decision. And so through that situation, even though I had cancer and, you know, I was in remission and all that, I still would, in between my treatments, would go out with my old friends and smoke and drink. Because that's the only way I felt normal. And one night I was in this nightclub over here in Sayreville, and something happened. And it's what Bill talks about in his story, the white light experience. Not a lot of people have that. You know, what they call it, they talk about the educational variety where you learn over time and you get sober over time. But something happened that night where it was like everything went into slow motion. I didn't hear anything except something from within myself that said, Kristy, you don't have to do this to yourself anymore. And that's my sobriety date, October 25th of 97. So from that day on, I never did anything else, not even smoked a cigarette. And that kind of started my journey of sobriety. You know, I stuck with that guy for a couple more years. He was my higher power. I didn't go to AA because I relied on him for support. And I was like a big baby. You know, I would have tantrums. I would yell at him, scream at him for all the stuff he did for me. And, you know, that relationship didn't work out. But, you know, I immediately started going to AA, and I would go to all the meetings where it was, I mean, I hate to say it, but it was like the bar without a drink. You know, I would only go, I would get all dressed up and fancy. And I was just talking about this, you know, if I wasn't, you know, if my self-esteem was so low that all I wanted to do was find another guy. And that's just what I did over the years until I got married. And my husband wasn't in AA. And, you know, I think for me, it was always about how it looked, you know. He was somebody that I was, you know, attracted to physically, but we were very, very incompatible in every other way you could think of. And that marriage lasted 12 years. It ended 3 years ago. We had 3 kids. And you know, I think that what I did a lot of is I found a lot of distractions, and he was one of them. It was very easy to blame him for things that were going wrong in the marriage, mostly financial. And I did those things because I was trying to avoid continuing to look at myself. Like I said, I always stayed in the rooms. I always went to meetings. I always had a sponsor. I always had sponsees. And I tried very hard to practice what they tell us to practice here. And then 3 years ago that ended. And I probably have had more growth in the last 3 years than I did in the other years that I've been here, because I was able to get that alone time. I was able to see finally what I did to push him out of the marriage. I'm able to see how my behaviors affect my children. And I've just been led to just a better way of life, and the thing of it is the answers were always here. The answers were always here. But like I said, I think a lot of us, and I'm just speaking for myself, will use other things, even though I say I'm sober. How sober am I? If I'm bashing this guy every single day about what he's doing to me that's wrong, is that really what I'm supposed to be doing? Is that really what God wants me to do? And they talk about in the book about us wanting control and us playing God in certain areas of our life. I might have been asking God for help when it came to my sobriety, but was I asking him for help in these other areas? Probably not. I still wanted that control over our finances, over what job he had, over, how much money was coming in, over where we lived or how it looked on the outside. And I just want to read this because I was looking at this today, because this is where I'm at now in my sobriety. And it's in the back of the book, and it's called Freedom from Bondage. And the third step prayer is about relieving us from the bondage of self, so I may better do thy will. Because Kristy's will doesn't work. I had a sponsor that said to me 14 years ago, how is your way working? And it wasn't working 14 years ago. So this is where I'm at today. It says, the mental twist that led up to my drinking began many years before I ever took a drink. So this is about the thinking mind. I see it in the kids that I teach. I used to teach older kids. And I could see the kids that have the behavior issues. I see myself in them because I had that type of thinking mind. Everything was about screw the world, screw the man. Everybody sucks. I'm going to do it my way. And it's what's up here. That's where it starts. The drinking for me was just to relieve that thinking mind. But that's where it all starts. So it says here, the mental twist that led up to my drinking began many years before I even ever took the drink. I remember feeling like crap at 6 years old. I felt like I didn't fit in my whole life, And I know a lot of people feel that way who aren't alcoholics, a lot of kids. I see it. I see it at school. Not all those kids become alcoholics. But I know most of us in here have felt that way at young ages. And for I am one of those whose history proves conclusively that my drinking was a symptom of deeper trouble. Well, what's that trouble? Through my efforts to get down to the causes and conditions, I stand convinced that my emotional illness has been present from my earliest recollection. I never did react normally to any emotional situation. I was overly sensitive. I blamed everybody for what was wrong with me. It says the medical profession would probably tell me I was conditioned for alcoholism by the things that happened to me in my childhood. And I am sure that they would be right as far as they go. But AA has taught me that I am a result of the way I reacted to what happened to me as a child. So what happened to me as a child? My father was extremely abusive, physically and mentally. I saw my mother get beat up. I got beat up by him. He would scream at me when I had cancer. He said to me one night, and I'm not here to blame my father. I love my father, but at this point, there's no relationship with him because I've had to cut that off. I've learned how to have boundaries by coming here. I never knew how to have that before. He said to me when I came home from cancer with no hair on my head, you better put a wig on and get a job because if you want to live in this house, you have to pay rent. There was no compassion for me. And I'm going to have that man around my children now? I know AA tells us to see our part, look at our part. But they have a part too. And a lot of the stuff that I've learned in AA, yes, I do see my part. I do see where I play the victim, where I could be in a lot of self-pity mode. But it got to a point now, especially over the last 3 years, where I've had to take a look, well, where was I affected? Where was I affected as a young kid where I had no choice? And the way I responded and reacted was based on how I was raised. And I know alcoholism, yeah, you have to have the physical, mental, and spiritual malady. And I have all three. But there's other things that go way deeper than that before the drink even showed up in my life. So just to keep going here, it says, what is much more important to me is AA has taught me that through this simple program, I may experience a change in this reaction pattern. So a lot of my reactions became habitual. It was like I talk about the anger. It was like a knee-jerk reaction. They told me in here for years, press the pause button. I didn't have one. I didn't have a pause button. If somebody pissed me off, I'd want to punch them in the face. When I found out that my husband was cheating on me 3 years ago, you don't know what I put that girl through. And that's with 20 years of sobriety. I'm not allowed at her job anymore. I'm not allowed on her street. I still pass sometimes. I want them to be scared of me. Like that's where I get my power from. The anger gives me power. Just like the drink made us feel powerful and gave us ease and comfort. The anger gives me power. And I don't think a lot of people talk about this in AA, but it's true. So, I just feel like the more honest you could be with yourself, they talk about it in step 4. We do a thorough inventory, and it could only be as thorough as where you are right now. My first inventory years ago looks nothing like the inventory I do now. But it has to be as thorough as you are aware. I wasn't aware of a lot of the things 20 years ago that I'm aware of now. It takes a long time to be able to see these things. And I don't know. I just know that through all these experiences, the beginning with the fellowship, my experience with getting sick, with people I've met through that, the sponsors I had over the years. In my 9th year of sobriety, I had just had my daughter, my first daughter, and she's 14 now. And I was in dire straits about the issues with my husband. And looking back, like this is something I couldn't realize while I was in the marriage. Looking back, I stayed in that marriage for as long as I did because I didn't want to be alone. And I always made him feel like he was the one that was the bad guy. But I couldn't leave because I didn't want to be by myself. So I stayed in a relationship that wasn't working at all. And because I didn't want to be alone. So look at that selfish motive, And I couldn't see it while I was in it. So in my 9th year, we were really doing really bad financially. And we were living in apartments over here in Middletown. And I would always say to him, oh, I don't even have a washer and a dryer. This isn't the way I was raised. My parents were very perfectionists. Everything was perfect. If there was a yellow mark in the front lawn, chem lawn was called that minute. My father's closet, it was like everything was in order. And I'm the same way. I'm the same way. And, some days I try not to make my bed. I try not to do all the dishes in the sink. But I am that anal when it comes to that stuff. So imagine living with me. It's not easy. And so in my 9th year, and this was another God moment. I had a work summer school. I had just had my daughter. She was only a few months old. My ex was up north. We were living in Nutley at the time. And I had to work. I work in Middletown. And I said, I'm not going to commute every day with a newborn baby and drop her off at my mother's. So I moved in with my mother. And I worked the summer school because we needed money. And Somebody told me, I was around my old friends from AA. I was back down here. And they were like, oh, go to Atlantic Highlands this month. There's this circuit speaker that's doing the steps over the course of the month. He's doing 3 steps a month. And he's really a great speaker. Now, I didn't even know what a circuit speaker is. I was still going to those meetings that would just say, don't drink and go to meetings. I wasn't really into the big book at all. And this is my 9th year. But that's what was going on back then. There wasn't really many big book meetings around. So I got led to this meeting in Atlantic Highlands, and there was this guy, Peter M., up at the podium. Never seen him, never heard of him. And he was doing the big book, and he said things in a way that I finally heard it. When they say that when the student's ready, the teacher appears? That's exactly what happened. It was like the big book flew open, and he said things that I could honestly say I don't think I ever heard before prior to that workshop. And one of the things he said was, lack of power is our dilemma. And that's on one of the pages in this book. And he said, well, flip it around. He would always turn things into questions, or he would flip things around so you would understand it better. And he said, but what about if you said, well, with power, there's no dilemma? And I had never heard it that way, because I always had a dilemma. I was like a walking tornado. They talk about the self-imposed crisis. I always needed drama, and if there wasn't drama going on, I was going to create drama. And he was the first one too that said to me, how's it working for you? How's your old belief systems working for you? And I said, they're not working. My old version of what my higher power wasn't working. And I was still struggling with a relationship with the higher power. And he said, well, make believe these are your old belief systems in this cup. Dump them out. And fill them with belief systems that work for you. And I never knew I was allowed to do that. I didn't know I had permission. I felt like he gave me permission to do that. Because I thought you had to carry around these things that you were raised to believe. I didn't know that you can get a new set of beliefs. And through that experience, I was able to, again, evolve with this higher power idea. And I remember going through the 4th and 5th step with him, and it was torture. It was very thorough, and I remember not feeling very good after that. But I think what it did was it really shined the light on what I wasn't doing in AA, and how I was still trying to have some control over areas of my life. But I'm very grateful for meeting him and for him taking me through the work, because even as far as a man sponsoring a woman, that's like a no, that doesn't happen here. But I approached him after that workshop and I said, well, if a sponsor's supposed to have what you want, you're it. And he agreed to do it. And he called my husband, and everything was legit. We always met in a public place. And he's an awesome person in my eyes. I'll never forget what he did for me. And it's funny because on Zoom now, he's back in the meetings that I'm going to, him and his fiance, Marion. And I just, that's no coincidences either, why everything comes full circle. And, like I said, 3 years ago when everything kind of came down, everything came down with the marriage, he left. And, I found out about the girlfriend, and I exploded. I exploded. And the first thing I did was I probably joined every dating site that exists. Every dating site. OkCupid, Plenty of Fish, Bumble, Tinder. I'm kicked off Tinder. I don't know why. But every single one I was on. And I went on such a spree with that. And that's another thing, I don't think is talked about a lot in here. You know, how we use those types of things that nobody wants to talk about to fill the void. And I felt so empty, and my ego was so bruised by him leaving. Even though I knew the marriage wasn't working, but I just, no way, he can't do this to me. Nobody could take him. He's mine. You know, and yeah, that was something. That was something. And that lasted a little while. And I realized, you know, just like the drink, it only works till it doesn't work anymore. You know, temporary fix. It was a temporary fix. Just like anything out there. So it all comes back to, well, what am I doing for myself, for Kristy now? And I prayed. I had a sponsor, Mary Beth, for many years who taught me a lot. She's a member of Design for Living, and I love her. And she taught me a lot about this book. And I went through the inventory a couple times with her. And then I just felt like I needed a new experience. And I prayed to God, well, who can give me this experience that I need to have right now? And again, no coincidence. Someone that I had met 20 years prior in North Jersey, who now lives here in South Jersey, or Central, whatever you want to call it, showed up at a meeting that I went to one night. And she was talking about a lot of this stuff that has to do with the inner child work, this stuff that they talk about here. Well, what happened in my childhood? What happened to little Kristy that makes Kristy abandon herself over and over again to men who don't love her, to relationships that go nowhere, to constantly looking outside of herself because it's too painful to look within, and continuing these behaviors that don't work. And it's Jackie. Jackie's here. And she came to the meeting the night that I was there, and one of the meetings, a meeting I had never been to before. It was a lighthouse in Spring Lake. I had never been there. And there she was. And she's taught me more about this stuff than I ever known before. You know, I could identify with a lot more clarity now where these issues come from, how I get triggered, why I don't have a pause button. I see my kids, I see myself and my kids, and I see how this generational dysfunction through my family, through the alcoholism, through the mental illness, through the depression, affects me and still affects my kids. And like, I was just in a therapist's office on Saturday with my daughter. And the therapist said, you're probably the first person in your generational history that's willing to break the cycle. Because I listened to my daughter. My parents always said I was the problem. They never listened to me. And, I just, I'll never forget, what this program has done for me and continues to do for me. But I do have to say that there's other programs out there that I've been led to. One of them is ACA, which is Adult Children of Alcoholics. And it's done amazing wonders for me over the past 2 years. So I go to AA and ACA now. And, I could identify so much with some of the things that they say there. The same way that we have traits and character defects that we talk about on our fourth step and that we identify within ourselves, that our sponsors guide us to see, they have in these other programs too. And one of the traits is being addicted to excitement. Now that's one of my traits that have never gone away. I didn't know. I couldn't pinpoint that. So instead of doing crazy stuff, I'll go on a roller coaster at Great Adventure. So you got to fulfill it somehow, right? And it's like I'm not going to deny that this is part of who I am anymore. This is who I am. And all I could do is continue to seek God's will for me. Notice that He is putting people in my life and situations in my life and things that I would consider bad almost like it's not bad. It's like just another way of him teaching me that I need to seek him even more. You know, like with my kids right now and my daughter especially, getting myself out of the way, like taking all the action that I can take for her, but then getting myself out of the way and say, all right, God, you take over. What's going to happen is going to happen here. Same thing with my husband. Same thing with his girlfriend. I've got to pray for the girl. I got to pray for her. Eventually. But I don't know. I know there's about 5 minutes left, but all I could say is it's been some journey. It'll always be a journey, and it's never about having time. You know, it's what happens in your life that gets you to see more and more, as long as you stay sober. You know, if you don't stay sober, you won't notice it. But so I'm just really grateful to be here again, Anthony. Thank you, and thank you for everybody who's here.